My homie Spooky has been running monthly days of one-page rules regiments, or as he likes to call it, Jank and Flank. The perfect name for how we like to play. I've used my Age of Sigmar armies previously, but my brain is broken, and I like to have unique forces for all the games I play. I don't recommend being as weird as me, but here we are. Anyways, for this project, I wanted to create an entire army for less than $100, and done fairly quickly. Enter in the new Skeleton Army box from Wargames Atlantic. And welcome to episode 1 of the $100 Army. Now, if you've never played any of one-page rules games, they are easy to pick up, free, and super fun. And did I mention free? I went to the website to see what kind of oops all skellies list I could make. Regiments has armies for virtually every classic fantasy trope. And the mummified undead looked perfect for my skeletal schemes. Chariots, horse archers, spear dudes, all skeletons. Perfect. Obviously, the big old block of spears was the place to start. One of my all-time favorite traditions in square-based, rank and flank games is unit fillers. It really can't be Jank and Flank without some unit fillers. Making big, multi-base size, diorama-type filler pieces looks cool, is super fun, and importantly for this project, lets you fill ranks while using fewer models. I hacked out a 50 by 75mm rectangle of thick plasticard, which would take up 6 bases as my unit filler base, and started gluing some stuff to it. And what better model to put on here than the banner bearer? Maybe climbing out of the ground. Add a few more bits and bones, assemble another 14 skellies, and it was time to slop some paint around. These shambling undead friends needed to be rusty, dusty, and sandy, leading me to start with a base coat of grunge brown. An excellent starting point for rust, as it's slightly more orange than my previous go-to, burnt sienna. With that laid down, I opted for a zenithal highlight of scruffulous brown. Obviously, I'm using an airbrush here. It's an essential part of my process. However, you could easily achieve a similar result by dry brushing this zenithal step. For me, cranking out a pile of minis in short order comes down to efficiently creating contrast. Maximizing visual impact with little effort, which most often means dry brush and washes. With the airbrush work done, I grab the dry brush and bone white. A little too on the nose maybe, but it's an excellent sandy off-white. This Skeleton Army box, and so many other brilliant kits, come from Wargames Atlantic. All of their kits are exceptionally well cast, hard plastic, and completely interchangeable. Whatever game you're looking for some unique minis for, they've got you covered. Head over to the website through the link in the description. Using it doesn't cost you a thing, but it does toss a few coins in the tip jar. Thanks Wargames Atlantic for supporting independent creators. Now back to these skeletons. With the bone white on these dudes, I was pretty happy with where they were headed, but felt they needed an extra step up in highlights. I very rarely use white, but it felt like the best option here, focusing on the head and upward-facing surfaces using a lighter touch with the dry brush. I'll often add a wash at this point, but I liked the dry, aged look of these skellies. They had the look of an army of undead trudging their way through the desert, so I opted to leave them as they were. Turning my attention to the weapons and other random metal pieces, such as the musician's horn, I reapplied the grunge brown. Sequencing of steps is pretty key for projects like this, and dry brushing entire models can be a bit messy, which is why it was a first step. Cleaning up these metal bits was pretty quick and easy. In an effort to bump up the rustiness, I thinned down orange to a wash consistency and added it to these metal pieces. then a tiny amount of chainmail silver on some of the edges, and it was time to move on to the banner. Now, I've never done any freehand, other than some hazard stripes on a few things, and I don't ever sketch or draw. But a simple banner, maybe a skull, how hard could that be, right? I took to the internet and found some cool art in the old 4th edition Undead Army book. Then busted out a watercolor sketchbook I'd picked up from the dollar store, and began sorting out what size would work. Roughly cutting out a chunk, then refining it by cutting it down a little at a time, constantly referencing back to the model to see how it looked, making sure to leave enough room for a couple of tabs to fold around the pole. First, I roughly mimicked the old skeleton shield art with a pencil. Reasonably happy with how that looked, I grabbed a brush and began sketching out this skull. First using black to outline everything. Then coming back in with some shades of brown in a pretty mediocre attempt to give it some dimension. Finally, using the grunge brown that was already on the palette to color in the rest. While I'm certainly not going to win any awards for this banner, I'm really happy with it, particularly as a first attempt. Once the paint was dry, I brushed on some matte Mod Podge onto the tabs, looping them around the pole, gluing them to the back of the banner. Then painted the Mod Podge onto the banner. This seals it all nicely while also making it stronger and more resilient as a gaming piece. I kept the bases super simple with a wash of some yellow ochre pigment powder, creating a nice sandy look. Combining pigment powders with water to create a wash is my preferred way to use them, primarily because it keeps the pigments in place when I hose everything down with matte varnish. And with that, we've got the first unit of the $100 army done and dusted. Hashtag dad jokes. I am super happy with how these little skellies turned out. I'm pretty pleased with the unit filler and banner. Jank and Flank, to me, is all about cool unit fillers and banners. Besides, it cuts down on the number of minis in a unit. Pretty clutch when trying to put together a relatively inexpensive army. Once again, thank you to Wargames Atlantic for making spectacular kits. Be sure to check them out in the description below. While you're down there, let me know if you've made your own banners or if you plan on trying some freehand yourself. Most importantly, thanks for watching. You are awesome.